After Oregon's latest decommitment, Dan Lanning has a very clear task in front of him.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Tons to get to today. Oregon basketball has got its first transfer. Are more on the way? Could there be more on the way for football? That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, Oregon's 2026 recruiting class is falling, cratering. It's in free fall. No, it's not. It's really not. But it is down to number 6 nationally, according to our friends at 24/7. It's been as high as number 2, but they've had a couple of guys flip away, both along the defensive line, in addition to Jonas Williams, the quarterback who flipped to USC. Recently, Tomuhini Topui, the 4-star defensive lineman, or Tom Thomas, some of you might know him, he is not yet a USC Trojan, but widely expected to be by a couple of different recruiting analysts nationally. They think he's going to flip to the Trojans. So with him gone, and there was another defensive lineman who flipped to Washington, the task for Dan Lanning to me is really clear. The position group that he first made his mark with on the trail a couple of cycles ago needs to once again become the focus, particularly interior defensive line guys. And I say this because Oregon does not currently have, now that Topui flipped away, they have 2 defensive line commitments, which is solid. They've got Viliami Moala, 3-star defensive lineman, who's 6'3", 305, an interior guy, and Tony Cumberland, who's probably kind of a Jordan Birch hybrid type, 6'4.5", 285. He's the more higher rated of the two. This is a position group that in the 2025 cycle, Oregon did not recruit in a volume or really in a big way. Like the defensive line, because they'd stacked the 23 and 24 classes so heavily, they didn't go as big in the 2025 class. So for 26, I think that when coaches approach recruiting classes, and every cycle is different because you don't know which kids are going to be available, how many battles you're actually going to wind up winning. I don't know if the staff wanted it to work out this way, but in the 2025 class, which is a really good recruiting class for Oregon, they have just 2 defensive linemen total and 0 guys on the interior. And if you think about the long-term outlook of every single position group, I think Oregon has stacked it just about every single spot and is well set up. But when you have an entire position group that went empty, interior defensive line, in 2025, and now you've lost a couple of guys in 2026, now one of them maybe wanted to flip to play offensive line, not entirely sure, I'd imagine that's going to be a big focus now on the recruiting trail. And I sense there's a growing sentiment. I don't think it's widespread just yet, but I get more than a couple messages from some of you Duck fans out there saying, hey, when's Oregon going to pick up the commitments again? When are they going to get back into rolling things along? Because suddenly they went from 9 commits once upon a time in the number 2 class. They're down to 6 commits now. But I trust Oregon to be able to go out with this staff and find good replacements on the recruiting trail. Heck, we might look back and say, this guy might be an even more highly touted recruit or might have even greater upside than the 2 guys that flipped away. But in 2024, you did have 4 interior defensive linemen. So it's not as if the pipeline for this position is completely void of talent, but just from a balance standpoint, you think this would be one they would go out and attack pretty hard. I anticipate they will. But in the 2024 cycle, they might view these guys as, long-term Ducks and guys that are going to work themselves into the rotations a little bit slower. And so maybe we don't have as big of a need to go out and attack the interior of the defensive line. They brought in Aiden Breland, who was a borderline 5-star. He was a 5-star until he committed to Oregon pretty much. You had Zadavian Sims, 4-star from the state of Oklahoma. Jericho Johnson, who was a really big guy, needed to get his body a little bit into game shape, but has plenty of potential and plenty of beef on the interior. And Tioni Gray, who I've heard a lot of good things really since he got set foot on campus last year, and he had a really good spring game. So the other reason that I hope Oregon goes out and is able to fight, maybe they just reload a bit in the transfer portal because they didn't bring in any guys in 2025. This is a position group that Dan Lanning has spoken about before last year at Big Ten Media Days. When I asked him, he said, the defensive line's a position where typically guys are not ready to play right away. Sure, there are some exceptions. He's also said if you're good enough, you're old enough. But typically, I think they like to take 1 to 2 years to mold these guys into the physical specimens that they want them to be, get their position established, and get them up to speed in the college trenches game. So the other reason, though, that this pops into my head is between Breland, Sims, Gray, and Jericho Johnson, are all of those guys sticking around? Because, we know from that 2023 class that had 10 defensive linemen, they were not all interior, all edge. There was a pretty good mix. I think it was a 7-3 split. You had the 3 edge guys that were Tatum, Tuioti, Mateo Iungale, Blake Purchase. Jaden Moore, I think, was in that class. So maybe it was 6-4. But are you going to be able to keep all those guys around? Like the whole if you can, great. Then maybe you don't need to go. Maybe Oregon's just going to say, you know what, we won't be as heavy in the 2026 class, and we'll go find portal replacements for your interior defensive linemen. Maybe that's the game plan there. But that's a position that I would watch, since they've lost a couple of guys who, of course, they once upon a time recruited, scouted, offered, talked to, and all that, and got him to commit. They obviously wanted him for a reason. So that'd be kind of that's a position group that I definitely will be watching in the next couple of weeks to see where the recruiting news comes down. But the one that everybody is always watching, of course, is quarterback. And the hunt for Jared Curtis continues. And the latest development is that he is scheduled to take another visit to Oregon and Georgia. His last visit was to Georgia. He's going to take another visit to both, reportedly, before he commits on May 5th. Now, what that tells me is he's really not sure. He's been to both places at least once, I think twice, over the course of his entire recruitment. He was going to take some visits a while back to South Carolina and Auburn, and he shut that down to focus on Oregon and Georgia. This has been an Oregon and Georgia race. This will continue to be an Oregon and Georgia race. But putting a visit to each spot on the schedule tells me he's not sure, or maybe he just really likes taking visits. It looks like a lot of fun to be wanted like this as a high school recruit and to go to campuses and see. He's from Nashville, Tennessee. Maybe he'd never been to Georgia before this whole thing started. I'd be willing to bet he'd never been to Oregon before this whole thing started for him. Maybe that's where his head is at. But, I get a question from time to time, where do you think Jared Curtis is at? You think they're going to get it? Well, doesn't seem like he knows. I talk to Brian Smith all the time here on the show. He says, don't really know right now. Feels like it's true 50-50. Him scheduling both of those return visits tells me he might not have made up his mind yet. And we'll see what happens when May 5th rolls around. But on the recruiting front, let me know your thoughts below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. We're going to the hardwood next because Oregon's got its first transfer. And I'm kind of puzzled. I'm intrigued, but I'm puzzled. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. It's going to be a 1 seed this year. That doesn't make it any less fun to watch. There have been high-level basketball games all over the place. Staying in the action with tournament games happening almost every day, it seems, as the Final Four approaches. There's always something exciting to bet on. Plus, Oregon props are there available for 2025. Win total, 10.5, tied for the highest in college football. National title odds, Big Ten title odds, second in the conference only to Ohio State. All that and more. Visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long at FanDuel.com. The rarely seen second segment sip from a water bottle with a Catan sticker on it, because Settlers of Catan is the greatest board game ever made. There's no close second. It's the Moneyball scene. There's so many applicable to the world, guys. There's Catan, and then there's some other good ones. But really, it's just Catan, and then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's Monopoly, you know? Anyway, Oregon basketball's got its latest transfer, and by latest, I, of course, mean its first transfer, the first of many. So, Devon Pryor is the newest Oregon Duck for Dana Altman and company next year off of back-to-back runs to the round of 32. They bring over Pryor, and it's a bit of a curious addition. I'm intrigued, but I'm in this kind of weird, fluid, I don't know what's happening here state. He's a 6'7" small forward, played the last couple of seasons with the Longhorns. He was listed as a sophomore this past year. He only played in 7 games his first season, but it doesn't appear that he redshirted. Maybe he'd be able to go back retroactively one day, get an extra year of eligibility, but he's got at least 2 years if he decides to use them both in college. Seems like he should. He's a native of Houston, Texas, and was a 3-star recruit in the class of 2023. So he spent the 23-24 season with Texas, and this past year, the Texas Longhorns got to the NCAA first round, and then they lost to Xavier, and then hired Xavier's coach, Sean Miller, former Arizona head coach. He's at Texas now, in case you did not know. But the reason I'm interested is Pryor is 6'7", 185 pounds, and he has got easy athleticism. I mean Kenny Wooten almost levels of it's easy for him to jump and get his head above the rim. When you check out his highlight reel, if you choose to do so, you should. It's a fun watch. In high school or in college, what you will see is he's doing a lot of dunking the basketball. Alley-oops, drives to the rim, feeds off the baseline. He gets up, and he gets up very easily. And when you are 6'7" with some length, that can be incredibly valuable. So his mid-range game, I think, can be really lethal because of his ability to elevate. When you're 6'7", you can get a lot of shots off, and it's going to be hard for guys to contest. His shooting pocket is not, high over his head, and he's got a solid-looking release from 3. I'll get to his stats more in just a moment, but I think offensively, that's where he has the biggest area of growth, is if he exploits that mid-range area, that's where he could be, I think, dangerous, in addition to his high-flying tendencies above the cylinder. So in his first year with Texas, he played in 7 games. He scored 5 points in those 7 games. Did not do a lot. And again, coming out of high school, according to 24/7, this was the number 210 player nationally in the country. So not an incredibly highly rated guy. In this past year with Texas, he started 2 games. He played in 24. He averaged just over 3 points and about 2 rebounds a game and didn't quite log 12 minutes per contest. Now, in that limited action, he shot 52% from the floor, only 3 of 16 from 3. I think his stroke would allow him to be better if he got more playing time and was in a bit more of a rhythm. Certainly, though, I think there's enough data from this past season to say 3-point shooting is not what he does best. Doesn't mean he can't do it well. He was 15 of 18 at the foul line. And in the 31 games that he has played in college basketball, he has hit double-digit scoring just 1 time. He had 10 points against Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's a low-major school. This past year on December 15th. That's the only time he's had 10 or more points. So that's why I'm kind of in this confused, fluid, what's going on, not really sure. Because Oregon has serious transfer needs. They have one 2025 high school recruit. They're looking at another one, and the college basketball recruiting cycle is different than that of football. So, Jamari Phillips, for instance, flipped from Arizona really late in the cycle last year. I think it was around the time TJ Bamba committed, or slightly before, which was kind of in the April-May timeline. So there still could be another name, maybe 2, but I think there'll probably be just 1 from the high school ranks at most for Oregon to add, in addition to J.J. Frakes, who's the shooting guard they added, who has a similar makeup of Devon Pryor, and it is Devon, not Devon. It's spelled D-E-V-O-N, pronounced Devon. He's 6'5", 180 pounds. Frakes is the high school recruit. Pryor is 6'7", 185 pounds. So 6'7", 185, athletic small forward. He is not like any player Oregon had on the roster this past season, which is why I'm kind of in this I don't know what to feel. I don't really know what to do with this particular news other than knowing he's not locked into a starting role. There is certainly more potential than what he's put on the court this year. The staff has to see a number of things they like, and there are plenty of things to like. You can't teach 6'7" and crazy athletic. This is not the type of transfer I expect Oregon to go after in the transfer portal, though. They are going to look at guys, or it should be at least, who have proven production experience. You are sending almost 29 points per game out of the starting lineup, in addition to 3 guys off the bench who are now gone. Because Bamba, Angel, Barthélemy, 3 starters, about 29 points per contest, gone. Seniors, graduated. Supreme Cook, backup big, plenty of energy, had some good moments this year. And we know how important backup bigs can be for Oregon basketball, because guys have gotten hurt in the past. Yeah, he's out of eligibility. Raheem Moss, yeah, he's done. Didn't do a ton, but was a pretty good defender. And then Mookie Cook, former 5-star defensive specialist. He's in the transfer portal, probably to go to a lower level school where he will be able to actually be a part of the offense. So 6 guys that were playing regularly or starting this past year that you have to replace, and the first guy you bring in averaged just over 3 points a game. Now, based on the limited film study I've done of him, I bet he could average 8 to 10 points a game. Don't know that I'd expect him to make that jump in his first year coming to the Ducks. Seems a bit more like a bench piece to bring scoring and athleticism when, the first unit inevitably gets into a scoring drought. But yeah, I'm really, this one threw me for a bit of a loop. My initial reaction when I saw the news flying around was, well, maybe that's kind of a TJ Bamba replacement. No, he's not built at all like TJ Bamba. Bamba's about 6'5" and is also a really good athlete, but Bamba's built. I mean, he's strong. He can push you around. He's an excellent proven defender. He's a proven scorer. And unfortunately for the Ducks this year, he had a career worst season shooting the 3-point shot. It was really unfortunate, but they figured it out by the end of the year. And that Oregon team, look, Duke's really good. They're in the Final Four. Tell me why Oregon couldn't have pushed them. Alabama, ended up getting beat a little bit by the end of it. But, maybe Oregon ends up losing that game. But I saw Oregon beat Alabama, who was in the Elite Eight, and Maryland, who was in the Sweet 16, and Texas A&M in the round of 32. Like, you never know in March. Duke was really good this year. I would have liked to see him get a shot just to kind of see how they matched up. But I really don't know what to expect from Devon Pryor. I think to know what our expectations should be here, we have to wait and see what other moves get made. Because like I said, 6 guys are out the door. I mean, priority number 1, of course, is, Bam Tracy's coming back. You know that. Guarantee Jackson Shellstad gets back first. Guarantee Nate Biddle gets back 1A, 1B. You got to bring those guys back. Secondarily, make sure KJ Evans comes back. That's probably your starting power forward. So you've got 3 starters, and I'd like Bam Tracy to continue being a bench piece. I thought this year's team was significantly better than last year's team. One of the indications of that was Bam Tracy went from being a starter to being a bench guy. That's because this team was deeper and more talented. And Bam Tracy, I like him. I'm glad he's back. I like him off the bench more than I like him to be a starting 2 or a starting 3. So really interested to see how this all plays out, because there's a lot to do. But more transfers are on the way. We just don't know who yet.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Okay, so curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this first part of it before I jump back to hoops. But the spring transfer portal window is 2 weeks away. Do you think Oregon needs more transfers? Is there any spot? I could maybe think of a couple. Really just linebacker. That's kind of it. Maybe at tight end, maybe, but they already brought in Jamari Johnson to back up Kenyon Sadiq. So on the football side of things, I really don't expect or think that there needs to be new transfer additions. I think the roster has got so much talent on it. I do think you want to, give some young guys a chance to develop without putting them in situations they're not fully prepared for, with an eye towards 2026, because that's how college football and college sports in general work. You live in the moment, you make the best of it, you always have an eye for a future. That's true in recruiting, that's true in football, basketball, wherever. But if there's a spot where you think Oregon needs to transfer, hey, by all means, you let me know in the comments below. Basketball, though, no question about it, more transfers are needed. So I mentioned the 6 outgoing players, and let's be optimistic that all 4 guys are indeed coming back. Bam Tracy said, yeah, I'm coming back, so that's good to go. Nate Biddle, let's lock down him and Shellstad and Evans, and let's make them the core 4. They'll be the big 4. If you get that reference, please let me know. But bring those guys back. Another guy who said he's returning is Jamari Phillips. I think Jamari Phillips is really interesting because the word on him coming out of high school last year when he flipped from Arizona is he's a tough shot maker and just kind of a shot maker in general. You know who was a shot maker for the last 2 years? Keyshawn Bartholomew. You know who's, as I often said, secretly but maybe not the most important Duck over the last 2 seasons on offense? Keyshawn Big Shot Bartholomew. So when you're talking about 6 guys that were a part of the rotation in different capacities last year, you've brought in 1 in Devon Pryor from Texas. Maybe Jamari Phillips takes a step forward and there's 2. You're still 4 bodies light. They're looking at the big man, Paul Mbia, not sure how to pronounce that exactly. The big man from France who plays for a team that Tony Parker owns, who had a 36-point, 17 rebound and 6 block performance over there or something. Now, he's playing in Europe, and it's not exactly the same as college basketball, but that's a name to keep your eye on, to be sure. A couple other ones, though. Let's start with Tyrone Riley IV, who Oregon has reportedly offered, according to Matt Prame over at 24/7 Sports. WCC all-freshman guard with San Francisco. Shout out WCC. That's a conference that I called games in college and did sports talk at Santa Clara as well. Learned how to do this sort of thing that's allowing me to talk to all of you right now. But over 12 Power 5 schools are interested. And yes, you heard me correct in saying Power 5 because in basketball, the Big East is a power conference, indicated by the fact that UConn won 2 national championships in a row coming into this season. Butler, once upon a time, went to back-to-back national championship games when Brad Stevens was the head coach. So, yes, it's Power 5 in college basketball, Power 4 in college football because of the downfall of the Pac-12, RIP. But Pac-12, side note, building a good basketball league and a good football league. But over 12 Power 5 schools are interested in Riley, who is a really good rebounder for a guard. Again, I don't know. Is that a Keyshawn Bartholomew role? Is that a bench role? That's not the exact profile of guys. Last year, Oregon's splashy impact moves in the portal were TJ Bamba and Brandon Angel. Now, Angel eventually got outplayed by KJ Evans as the season went on, and he was on the court late and playing more minutes per game for the last several weeks of the season. I think that's frankly something we all like to see, because Evans does have more potential than Angel. However, Angel's a significantly better offensive player, which is where KJ Evans really needs to get to work in the gym this offseason. If he does, guy can be an all-conference player. But again, Riley's a guy who is around 10 points a game this past year with San Francisco and 6 rebounds per contest, and that's all good and fine. Where's that fitting in? Is he starting next to Shellstad? Is he coming off the bench with Pryor, or is Pryor started? I don't know. I really don't know. But one name that I'd just be so down for. I have not seen or heard that Oregon's after KJ Lewis, but I want KJ Lewis. This was Arizona's 6th man, who you may remember from putting the absolute clamps on anybody he defended in that round of 32 game in Seattle a little while ago. So, yeah, I'd be pretty down for KJ Lewis. Toughness, defense, the grittiness you lost with TJ Bamba, you got to fill that somewhere. I don't know if Tyrone Riley is that guy. I certainly know that Devon Pryor is not that sort of guy. And I think Oregon needs two tough, tone-setting guys in the starting five. You got to have two. Last year, they had one, and it was Bamba. And he was good, not great, because I say Dylan Brooks is great at it, and Bamba was good. But I'd be down for KJ Lewis, or that sort of player. He's a 10-point a game. He passes a little. He rebounds well. He defends well. I'd be super down for super down for KJ Lewis. I hope Oregon goes after him there. But let's wrap up with this question from David. If you want to be in the mailbag, YouTube comments, Twitter, become a Locked On Ducks Insider where you get priority access and other perks as well. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. David asks, when will a starter in a Sweet 16 team opt for the money portal instead of continuing on to the championship? Another question, will anybody take a guy that does that? First of all, yes, somebody would take a guy if that happens. Second of all, we haven't had a starter, but Michigan's season was still ongoing and a guy hit the portal. I'm pretty sure there were 2 or 3 players this year. They weren't starters, but they were on teams whose seasons were ongoing. But hey, the spring transfer portal window for college basketball players open. Got to get in it, strike while the iron's hot before the musical chairs of options is ultimately removed and pulled out from underneath you. So to your question, David, this goes back to a point. I don't think a starter would ever go. If you're in the Sweet 16, you've made it to the second weekend, you know you have a chance to make a run. I don't think we will see that. But we see the equivalent of this in college football. It's lunacy that this is allowed to happen. You had Bo Prabula this past year, Malik Murphy the prior year, the primary all season long backup quarterbacks on college football playoff semifinal teams who transferred. Prabula this past year went to Missouri. Murphy this past year went and played at Duke. He's now at Oregon State. They transferred while their national championship caliber season was going on because the calendar is so screwed up. College athletics has got to stop putting the transfer portal, which is widespread free agency, unlike anything we see in professional sports, stop putting it at any point in time where the season's ongoing. There's a big, giant, long 12-month calendar where you can put this stuff. In short, here's how I'll solve college athletics in the portal. You take the college football season, which ends on January 20th now with the national championship game. You wait 10 days. You open the portal for 2 weeks, February 1st to February 15th. That is when players can go in. That is, you can keep the rule on players can come out at any time. That's fine. If you want to start it slightly sooner, fine. But I just want to have a little gap, a little buffer before we move on to next year. Then take the early national signing day in December, get rid of it completely, and make it one signing day that happens after the portal window. And that way college football dominates the offseason the way they're actually capable of. We don't do that right now because the sport is so backwards in so many ways. Then for college basketball, institute a similar structure. Whenever your national championship game is played, which for college hoops will be this coming Monday, Sunday, I don't remember exactly the date of it, early April, whatever, wait 10 days and then open the portal. Let things breathe, let things settle, let people figure out where they might want to go, get their affairs in order, and then open the portal. Enough with player movement while the season is ongoing. It is good for nobody. End of rant, end of show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.